Incredible.
All right. I'm super excited to be here with the illustrious
Ooh.
Benjamin Lutz.
Hi, everyone.
Yes. So I'm going to pass it to Ben so that he can introduce himself and his role with YPFP and, just tell a little bit about why I decided to interview you about this opportunity.
Well, you're the kindest, Andy. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. My name is Benjamin Lutz, and the role that I'm talking about tonight, at least, is the Director of Youth Summits for Young Professionals in Foreign Policy, which is the membership branch of Globally. YPFP, or again, Young Professionals in Foreign Policy, has the distinct honor of selecting the American delegates for the Y7 and the Y20 Youth Summits each year. The Y7 and the Y20 mirror the G7 and the G20. There's actually a bunch of them. There's the C7 for civil society, the W7 for women, the T7 for think tanks,
The B20, B7.
B7, B20 for business. There's a whole lot of the sevens or the 20s. But the youth is the oldest version of the G7, G20 summits that brings youth perspectives to the global arena. And since 2018, YPFP has chosen the American delegates to go to both the Y7 and Y20 summits. So my role within Globally and YPFP is to help select, organize, and train phenomenal delegates each year to represent the United States, American youth, globally, YPFP, at these international youth summits. Andi here is a phenomenal alumna of this program as one of the 3 delegates for the Y20 2020, which is a mouthful. And we'll talk a little bit about sort of what that role looked like and all the great work that she did at that summit. But just sort of the brief overview. The Y7 is a space for the 7 countries that make up the G7, their youth versions, to come together, negotiate, collaborate, and create a communique. The Y20 is the same thing, just 20 countries instead. So it's a larger audience, more negotiation because more perspectives being in that space. The other really cool piece I will mention before we get more into this is when the United States is the host of the G7 or the G20, that means then that YPFP and Globally is the host of the Y7 and the Y20. Not only are we the selection committee, but the host, which is what happened in 2020. The United States hosted the G7, so we hosted the Y7. I'm happy to share links and engagements, but if you go to ypfp.org and then explore, you will see the 2020 Y7 that we hosted. So not only did we select the 4 Americans for that summit, but we also brought together all of the international delegates to come together and negotiate. And it was the first ever virtual summit, which is super fascinating in of itself. So I'll stop there with that sort of overview of I have the incredible pleasure and honor to connect and engage and learn from the delegates each year as they collaborate, negotiate at each of the summits. And I first met Andi a year and a half ago when she interviewed for the 2020, no, actually 2 years ago at this point. Wow. The 2020 Y20 as a delegate, which happened in October of that year. So thank you again for having me here. I love these summits. I think they're a unparalleled way to engage the global community.
Yes, I agree. And like just drawing on my own experience with the Y20 2020 and also with the delegates from the Y20 2021 who like reached out and were in contact with myself and Lauren and probably Jesse as well about like what does this experience look like? What did you take from this experience and how did you leverage this experience going forward? I wanted to capitalize on that. And that's why we're doing this event to bring it to a wider audience, to allow people to understand a little bit more of the background and why this event is so, so, so amazing and why you should apply if you have not done so already for the Y7 as well as the Y20, which, as the banner of this informational interview suggests, is going to be hosted in Indonesia. So totally jealous. Like if you apply and you are selected and get to go to Indonesia.
Congratulations. Yeah. So the host of both of the summits change every single year, as Andi is saying. And this year, the Y7 will be hosted in Germany and the Y20 will be hosted in Indonesia. Right now, today, January 7th, the Y7 application is open and is due January 16th. We'll share the links and whatnot very soon. The Y20 opens January 16th and is due the 30th. And all the details are, again, ypfp.org, the Youth Summits tab. You can see all of it there. But yeah, it is a really incredible space to not only negotiate, be the American voice, but then also explore the host countries and learn from the components there. The 2020 summits and the 2021 summits, all four of them were virtual. It is likely that the 2022 summits will be in person, meaning 4 Americans will go to Berlin and 4 Americans will go to Jakarta, along with all the other delegates this year. But regardless if it's in person or virtual, the negotiation pieces and showcasing the global communique and collaborating internationally remains the same. And of course, the connection to the actual G7. If you are selected for the American, and if you're listening and you're from a not the US, but from another G7 or G20 country, we can definitely connect you with that organizing body. I am only focused on the American delegates, but there is a chance to collaborate with the U.S. government's G7 and G20 team specifically to learn how they negotiate on the real thing and how they learn from the Y7 and the Y20 in their negotiations. There's a really cool connection there that I think is also really special.
Well, yeah. So building off of that, the talk that you were saying about the connections between the G7 and the Y7 and the G20 and the Y20, can you tell me about how you've seen delegates use this platform to further their professional development?
I mean, Andi, you're a phenomenal example, quite frankly, of what you have done post Y20. And your enjoy her LinkedIn profile. You can see all the great things after 2020 that she got involved with. But what I will say is how the summits are organized is you are a delegate on a specific track. So you have expertise on XYZ. For Andi, she was the global citizen delegate from the United States in that track. So she and the other 19 delegates negotiated on global citizenship themes, ideas, issues, etc. So Andi is the expert on global citizenship for the American voice at the Y20 2020. All of the delegates for every single year and every single summit are an expert in that specific track. They wouldn't have been chosen otherwise because we want to have the representation there, the nuances of that track. Not every single piece ever, but enough to negotiate and collaborate. And so to be able to make a network of their direct counterpart in the theme field of study that they're connected with internationally, that alone is really powerful, regardless of the job opportunities or whatnot that have come for many delegates post their summits. The chance to meet 6 other for the Y7 or 19 other for the Y20 young people your age focused on climate, food security, health, whatever the theme may be that year, is really, really, really powerful. And there are often collaborative things well after the summits between delegates on the same track, because again, it's your counterpart from another country. I also say a lot of delegates have used this platform to go back to school or continue their studies, however that may be advanced. Several of them have gone off to the United Nations to negotiate and collaborate and further engage with the Y7, Y20. Several delegates have helped with the following year's Y7, Y20 as a recent alum. So not just a mentor to the new selected delegation, but also helping to coordinate and plan and organize. A lot of ways to sort of showcase this global space. What I will say, and what really initially attracted me to being a part of the selection committee was that, I was a very big Model UN nerd, very proudly, throughout all of my middle, high school, and college experiences. And what's really, if you've done Model Congress or Model NATO or Model whatever, all of those are really, really incredible for negotiation and learning and whatnot. The Y7 and the Y20 are not model, though. They are the actual global summit, negotiating and collaborating, and then you actually have a space at the G7 or G20. And I think the realness of the summits in that way. Again, I love all the models, please don't get me wrong, but the ability to directly influence G7 or G20 negotiations as a result of you being in the Y7 or Y20 is such a huge experience. And no matter who becomes the future Y20 delegates, Andi is forever one of the 3 Americans who was at the Y20 2020. And something that undoubtedly, and I know she has used for her career development since that summit, a year and a half ago. So there are so many opportunities post-summit to deepen what you're focusing on. And again, all of the delegates are highly skilled in that track anyways, so they're already working in that field and can leverage the incredible work they did at the Y7 or Y20 to further their roles in that field. It's happened every time.
Yes, I can say for my cohort as well as the following cohort. And if I look at the 2019 delegate that I was able to meet, Vannery, who actually told me about the opportunity to apply. That is the truth. I think the funniest thing about my year was that both myself and our head delegate, Lauren Power, who is amazing, she is currently based in Japan, but we both focus on people and on the movement of youth and exchange and things like that. And so it was like, how do you decide who goes where? Which kind of brings me to my next question, which is when you're looking at the applications and when you're looking at the backgrounds of delegates, what are you looking for specifically to the question I asked just now? How do you decide, who goes where if expertise is similar?
Sure.
And, just do you have to, like, what are the requirements? Do you need to be in the US? Can you be anywhere? Do you have to be a citizen? Can you have a green card? Like those background things.
Absolutely. So I think the most important metric, well, U.S. citizen is number one, just because it's connected to the U.S. government, so there has to be that space there. But the actual most important metric is a background in that theme. And I think, Andi, your year was very strange because all three of the themes were very similar in terms of the specific tracks really overlapped: the future of work, global citizens, and
engagement
and youth engagement. Those all really overlap. Basically every other summit doesn't have that tight of an overlap. I mean, this year's themes are climate, health, global economy, and digital and technology for the Y7, and for the Y20, it's sustainable planet, digital and technology, youth empowerment and employment, and diversity, equity, inclusion. So there are some overlaps, but not nearly as tight as the 2021 was. So the biggest thing is if you have expertise in one of those 8 themes I just said, and you can demonstrate that in the written application that happens first, and then of course the interview if you're selected for that space, that's already a game changer. Quite frankly, we do not care about your background. You do not have to be based in the United States. If you are a US citizen and have engaged background in one of those 8 themes, because again, you will just be one of those delegates, that is the biggest thing we look for. Your year, Andi, again, was notoriously hard because the themes were so similar that it's like, where do we put these 3? Because all of them are great and could fit any of the 3. Generally, if you were a climate expert, you're probably not necessarily an econ one. You could be a climate economist. I'm not saying you can't be, but there's generally a more difference between the themes. And I would say, yeah, every summit except for Y20 2020 has had unique themes, which again, it's up to the host on what those themes are. So maybe next year it'll be 3 of the same things again. Who knows? But yeah, the biggest thing really is because you're going to be negotiating, coming up with policy points, recommendations, basically training the G7 on, hey, this is what the youth of your countries think. Do something with this, please. We want to ensure that the delegate that's chosen has a background in that space. So, if you are interested in climate change, that's great, but you might not be chosen to be the climate delegate if you aren't not necessarily working, but have been connected in some space. That could be advocacy work, that could be a professional job, that could be higher education, or a combo of all of that. To us, it's really more important to the ways that you bring to the table. Your skill sets and backgrounds is what we're looking for. And in the questions of the applications, you get to sort of brag on yourself, as I think most applications should be anyways. So this is why I think I should be chosen for this track, let's just say digital technology, because I have helped to develop a new tech for my company, or I created an app, or I have a master's degree in technological change. Just made that up. But those components that a successful applicant brings to the table is to showcase, hey, I know what I'm talking about, but my background could be really unique, far stretched and wide. And quite frankly, especially for the American delegates, we want as diverse of a representation as possible. Yes, be an expert in that theme, but where you're currently living, where you come from, what your story is, quite frankly, doesn't super impact the application. If you are relevant to that theme, that is the biggest thing we're looking for for all summits to come. Again, if none of these 8 themes are relevant this year, they might be next year. The themes change year to year, summit to summit, and there can always be a space for your expertise to shine.
That is true. And I know I'm asking these questions, and I'm asking them because, it's like, okay, I want someone, like if this was an FAQ, what would they ask?
Yeah, sure.
But I can also provide examples. So as I mentioned, Lauren is based out of Japan, and she's been in Southeast Asia for like the last couple of years.
Mhm.
Our other delegate, Jesse, he was in California and I'm based in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And so I can say that this was one of those really rare opportunities to engage in a space that brings you to an international platform and an international stage that's outside of DC,
Yeah.
which we all love.
Yeah, and ironically, the Y7 2020, which was hosted in the United States in DC, none of the 4 American delegates were based in DC that we chose. And again, I mean, it was virtual anyway, so it didn't matter. 2 of them actually weren't even in the United States at the time of the summit, but they had the skill set and expertise to do great work and be a part of the summit. That was what we were looking for. That's why we chose them. And quite frankly, it won't be in the United States for another 6 years, anyways. So it will be abroad all over the place. Again, this year is Germany and Indonesia. The following is Japan for the Y7, India for the Y20, and we don't know the years after that yet. But hey, stay connected, and you'll see a really cool country with cool themes that could be relevant to your expertise.
Yes. So speaking of the switch to virtual, which happened in 2020, my year, I will say Saudi, who was the host for the Y20 in 2020, chef's kiss, amazing platform
Yeah,
that they used. But what changes has YPFB incorporated as it adjusted to the virtual nature of the conference? And will these changes remain in place post-pandemic?
Great question. I will say in terms of like how we negotiated, really not much change, because even in the in-person summits, there's weeks and months leading to the actual summit that negotiation takes place, which was virtual anyways. So there were some pieces that really weren't super different. I will say it was much harder this year. I'll do the hardest part first and then the easier switches for time zones, because there are delegates from the West Coast to Japan, at least just for the Y7. Actually, for the Y20, that's basically all of those time zones as well. Finding a central time for some delegates was 6 a.m. and for some delegates it was 11 p.m. And that is just what ended up being as a result of normally you're in the same city, whatever time zone you are, it doesn't super matter because you're in the same physical place. So that was a super challenge in finding a platform that can accommodate different time zones, different web browsers, different IP addresses, different Wi-Fi's, and for the Y7's purposes, 7 different. Well, actually, it was much more than 7 because all the delegates weren't in the country that they're representing. So, I think it was like 11 different countries of IP. And then, of course, we had guests tune in and listen, which, gosh, we're like 500 guests a day from 30 more countries. So, finding a platform that could accommodate all that was huge. Now, what I will say is an in-person summit, the guests are going to be people who are already in that city. So the chance to be virtual opened up the audience to a lot wider of a space, to those countries not connected to the Y7, Y20, or just, other interested folks on the negotiation. So that was a really cool piece to sort of widen the impact of, the Y7 is still just going to be those 7 countries negotiating, but there can be the 190 plus other countries listening and engaging and learning those conversations, which was awesome.
Community building.
Exactly. The other part I think that was really cool about the virtual space was that we were able to mobilize a lot quicker and make cool like reactions. So like the summer of 2020 in the United States was the height of the Black Lives Matter protesting, and YPFP's the Y7 2020 had an official reaction from all of the delegates that year. We also had an official reaction to COVID. This was completely separate to their negotiation, but because both of those 2 things were relevant to the host country and to their own countries as well, they thought it was important, and we championed that, to create sort of we are the delegates of the Y7 2020. This is a statement that we think is important to share on top of the negotiation that we're going to be doing. That is not as easy to do in an in-person space because the focus in person is entirely the negotiation of the summit. And when we switched to virtually and did more of the negotiation before the summit, so the summit was more of a like showcasing the points, we were able to through those negotiation processes, include 2 additional reactions. All those you can see on the website. And I think, granted, YPFP is not hosting the summit anytime soon. But I will say the Y20 2020 and the Y7 and Y20 2021, which were in Saudi Arabia for 2020, and then it was the United Kingdom for the Y7 21 and the Italy for the Y20 2021. Those 3 all also had to their own, country's standpoint, reactions and live updated pieces during that summit. Not necessarily not saying they built off of what we did. They could or couldn't. That's fine. I mean, we were the first one to do it virtually, but the chance to focus more on the camaraderie building amongst the delegates, huge, and to have live reactions, and then to make the summit a global audience like celebration of the negotiation and the points that were created instead of sort of closed door in-person pieces.
Yeah.
So, who knows if Germany or Indonesia will be in person or virtual. The goal is in person for both, and so maybe they will incorporate. Yeah, for sure, hope so. And they will probably incorporate a lot of the camaraderie building leading up to the summit. Because in my role now, or even during the Y7 2020, my role is to support the American delegates that are chosen and collaborate with the host. So even the Y20 2020 with Saudi Arabia, I was often on the partner calls, all of the not the me's, but the host orgs across all of the Y20 countries. We're on calls together, learning from what that year's host is looking for, or updates, or whatever else it may be. All those pieces are really crucial and helpful. And I think the virtual summit also, at least from the organizer perspective, which delegates don't really see, has made all of us connect much more directly. And nothing against 2018 and 2019, but kind of committed the delegates had like one or two calls, and then they went in person and had an excellent time, but that was kind of the end of it. Whereas in 2020 and 2021, there was much more connection amongst the delegates as well as between all of the hosts. And I think that was really helpful too, to sort of, hey, how's your recruitment thing going? Or, hey, our two delegates are becoming friends. Maybe we should do a bilateral event or whatever else. Those additional opportunities for collaboration are I think a unique aspect of the virtual summits that I think is continuing, which is lovely to see.
Well, yes, I can say the best part of the Y20 2020 for me was, first off, our head delegate, Lauren, who honestly can never gush about enough. She is amazing.
Yeah, incredible.
But she was so focused on community building. Like the amount of bilaterals that we did in collaborations with other delegates was huge. And I know that a lot of the friends that I made from there, I still have. Like I still talk to the Mexican Global Citizen Delegate, Willie Superlaveda, like weekly, if not like multiple times a week. And I like still check in on a couple of other delegates who are now friends and who I just want to make sure are doing okay. And of course, now that it's in Indonesia, I'm like, hey, Sarah, are you participating? She was the Global Citizen Delegate in 2020. But you mentioned your role. And so I was wondering if you could tell us what it is and how you are involved with I guess a bit more about how you're involved on the delegate side as opposed to the event and the behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. So the term is called Sherpa, which quite frankly, I don't really love that is the term, but that is what the G720 use. And so we keep it parallel. But I will say director. I think that's a more clean term. Regardless, my role, firstly, is helping to choose the delegates. So I run not just me, but with the team at YPFP and globally, run the application process, the interviews, select the delegates. Great, they're selected now. The next sort of step is submitting them to the host. So the host knows here are the great Americans who are going to be on those tracks. Glad that they get to be involved. And then we do several skill building workshops leading up on the American side, leading up to the summit. The Americans are from the same country, but they're not on the same tracks at all. They're, one American per track. And so during the actual summit, they're not really going to interact necessarily because they are the American on the Econ Summit track, right? It is not all the Americans together. And so my role pre the summit is to bring that sort of, hey, you are the four chosen because you have incredible expertise and we'll learn from each other. There could be some overlap amongst your summits, but regardless, like you four are the American voice of this year's summit. We help them create a survey so they can gather information across American youth on what American youth want them to negotiate on their behalf for. We do some mediation and negotiation training, but the biggest, and I think their coolest part, is connecting with the G7 team directly. So the G7 Sherpa, again, I don't love that term, I'm going to say director, but just so you know, when you hear that lingo, is in essence the me equivalent, but an actual government employee who goes to G7 G20 summits each year. So really not the me equivalent, but I'll say that to myself look more important.
You're fancy.
Why not go for it? But I connect with them and say, here are the Y7 delegates, for this year's summit, or the Y20 delegates, or both, quite frankly. As you prepare for the G7, if there's tidbits or information or negotiation tactics, etc., that you think is helpful to share with them. Once the summit actually begins, well, really probably a month before the summit, quite frankly, I really don't have much of a role. Listening to the delegates and helping them out, but a month before is when they're really in the negotiation process, and so they are fully in for 2022, Germany or Indonesia, connecting with the German or Indonesian tracks, learning, engaging, collaborating, arguing, debating, writing, all of the processes that get to that final document, the communique. So I'm there to soundboard or relay any concerns to the host. There's a couple host meetings amongst all of the host advisors all together, but quite frankly, after the delegates are chosen and we do a couple of the skill building workshops, the American delegates are ready to dive in with their survey data, with their research, and to begin negotiating.
You let them out into the world.
We let them go. We let them do their great thing and become authors of that year's communique. Yeah.
Well, all right. So we only have about 5 minutes left, but I know one question that was super important for me when I was in the Y20 and when I was thinking about this opportunity and also just future opportunities in general is the Alumni Association. Yeah. So what is done to, I guess, grab all the past delegates together and put them in one area, be it a LinkedIn group or occasional email chains or something like that?
So the first step, that's not really an association, but the previous year's delegates are mentors to the current year's delegates. And there's I guess I missed this in my last question that you asked me, is facilitating that call. So the 2021 Y7 delegates will be meeting the 2022 Y7 delegates to say, hey, I just did this a year ago. Here's some cool tips to share.
Yeah.
Which you talked about earlier. I think that's a lovely space. I know that's not a full alumni association, but I think that is a cool connection point. All of the Americans since 2018 that YPP has chosen are all on, again, the YPP website. So you can see all of the previous year's delegates and Andy's incredible photo as well. But the full extent of all of the summits, there is an American Alumni Association. We have a lot of email blasts for upcoming summits, to speak at or connect with or engage with. Definitely those happen. But generally the alumni are usually per summit. So there's like a Y7 group and a Y20 group. Those are, so for all alumni of every year of all of the Y20s, which is and of all of the Y7s, that's generally more where the alumni associations are. Just again, because the people in a Y7 is only 7 countries worth. So it's a smaller group with, more focused conversations because it's only 7 countries. For the Y20, it's much more perspectives, a lot more people, it's wider. They're both excellent. I'm not comparing them other than just the numbers are different. But obviously the alumni associations, the Y21 is much larger, given that there are many more countries, communities, years of it. For this year, there are 4 delegates for each. So 4 times 7 is 28 for the Y7. 4 times 20 is 80 for the Y20. A lot more people to connect with. So, the alumni associations in that space are really per summit and definitely per year. Like the 2020 Y20, I know, Andy, you're connected with many of them and still are engaged with. That's a wonderful space. In terms of what YPFP does for all of the American delegates, when there's other events that are upcoming, the chance to, do town halls or engage or learn from each other, that is really the main focus that we help organize, post summit. And of course, when a summit's about to happen, all the alumni of any summit, but specifically the summits that they did, so for the Y20 this year, I'll definitely call on you, Andy, and all the rest of the American Y20 alumni to sort of support the Y20 this year and the Y7, but you were the Y20 delegate. So they're both great. They're both great.
Well, as everyone can tell, obviously I have a closer relationship to the Y20. So I know that one is going into its 12th year of running the Youth Summit. What year is the Y7 on?
Ooh, I really should know this. I'm pretty sure they started the same year, but the Y20 had less less tracks. It was generally like only 2 tracks, 2 to 3. This is the first year it's 4. So Indonesia is increasing the number of delegates this year. The Y7 has always been 4 delegates, as far as I'm aware. But granted, we also only got this honor in 2018, and the Y7 Y20 began in 2011, 12.
Sure, math.
Please check me on that. I don't fully remember or know, but so that means there are alumni who are in their 40s now who did the Y7 Y20 when they were a delegate 13 years ago. And what's really cool again is the host changes every year, so you can attend with a different country, see different perspective. There's so many incredible ways to connect. So I guess to sort of plug this upcoming cycle, if any of those tracks are relevant to your expertise, again, the Y7 app is currently open. It closes on January 16th. The Y20 app opens on January 16th and closes on the 30th of January. Everything is at ypfp.org, and then you can just scroll to the Youth Summit section and, again, click the Y7 or Y20. You can learn all about the history, again, read all about Andi and all the other previous year's delegates. And, this is an incredible opportunity to connect yourself globally. And again, if you aren't chosen this year or the themes aren't relevant this year, there's always next.
There's always next year until you're 35. Right. At that point, you're not considered a youth anymore.
Not a youth. No.
And with those last words of humor, you're still young at 36, we promise. Ben, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me and, just sharing this opportunity with the folks who are listening, with the folks who'll tune in later, and just giving a bit more context to something that could seem a little bit nebulous when you're just reading the application or the information page. I hope that this was informational and helpful to all of you out there who are looking for opportunities to engage in the world stage in ways that are fun, in ways that are impactful, and in ways that directly challenge and change the way that governments are engaging with each other. I know for the Y20 2020, that was the first time ever, and this is the last tidbit I'll leave you with, that LGBTQ made it into a communique in 10 years. So there's a lot to do in these positions. There's a lot that you can change and impact. So I totally impress upon you to apply and to try out for this opportunity. And even if you do not want to try out for this opportunity, apply to join YPFP, which is an amazing organization that is connecting youth from around the US and several other international locales. I know Lauren, who I keep mentioning because Chef's Kiss, recently opened up a Japan chapter of YPFP. So there's so many opportunities within the Y7, Y20, but also within YPFP itself. So please come join us, meet Ben, meet me in other avenues, and just have amazing experiences.
Absolutely. Thanks again for this opportunity, and I hope to see your applications, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Ben. Bye, everybody.